Brain Access Solutions.
Hi, I'm Glenn of Brain Access Solutions. Welcome to my vlog. Welcome also to my C#.NET tutorial for beginners. And we are now at lesson 13. In this lesson, we will learn how to properly create a generic list in an encapsulated class. What I mean by encapsulation is that we keep the internal representation of an object hidden from the outside manipulation. So it means instead of directly accessing the fields or the class that we're going to create, the internal properties of the class can only be manipulated inside of the class itself. That is the importance of the encapsulation. To demonstrate it, let's create a new form. Create a new project and select the Windows Form app. Save this to our Visual Studio project locations, and we will create a new folder for that project, which is lesson 13. We should also rename our project name to lesson 13. Always select the latest version of .NET framework, and in my case it's .NET 8.0. So now that we have our form, let's resize it to a smaller size and change the name of the form to FRM lesson 13. Let's change the text as well to lesson 13. The difference between the text and the name of the form is that you can add spaces in between words of the text or the title. This is what you see in the title bar of the form, while the name of the form is hidden from your view. The main difference is that you cannot add spacing in between the words of your form name. Okay, let's go ahead and add a text box to our form. Increase its length to accommodate the two fields that we're going to create, and set its property multiline to true here. Change the name of the text box to txt list. Now that the multilines is set to true, we can go ahead and highlight this guide at the bottom and drag it down. This will increase the height of the text box to accommodate the data from a one-way table or one-way data. Now let's add a label to mark our list. The label's name doesn't necessarily have to be renamed, and we're just going to be concerned with its text and change it to list for this list here. Now we can go ahead and add our command button. For this button, we will have to change the text to great. So what we're trying to do here is, as I've said earlier, we're going to create an encapsulated list, an encapsulated class which is a list or a generic list. Let's write the code. So above the button click here, this is the button click. We didn't rename its name, that's why it was called button 1, which is also fine because we will only have one button for this tutorial. If we have multiple buttons, it is advisable to always rename the buttons to its corresponding function. So here, I'm going to create the class that will create the table or the generic list for us outside the method or the event click. Okay, so let me explain this class a little bit. We created this class person, which is an encapsulated type of class outside the click event, in order for us to understand what all these keywords mean. Public class is just defining the person class here. So this person will represent an individual which has a name and an age. This public string here is the property of this person. So the name is a public property of the person. We declare it public so that it can be accessed outside the class when we're calling it, or when we are creating an instance of it. Now this get set here is the new feature of C#. You don't need to create a separate field for it to hold the values. This get and set here is a new feature from C#.NET. What it does is that it creates a private field that stores the temporary value for assigning later to this public string. So instead of us creating a private field to be assigned to the public property, C# automatically creates and hides that for you. So this is the function of the get and set. And that goes the same for the age. It also creates a field which is hidden from you, from us. Once we assign that using the constructor, here is the constructor part, we create another property here, which is the constructor, named as person. Now, the string name or the properties of the variables of the classes can be a different name. But when we are creating a constructor, bear in mind that this and this should have the same name. But the parameters of the constructor can have a different name, like this. As you may notice, the public string or public property of the class person has a capital name, but the parameter string of the constructor person is written in a small or in the lowercase name. You can also name it like this, and it will still work as long as you assign it here as well. To make it simpler, we'll just name it name and here. So what we're doing here is that we are creating a constructor which can be accessed outside of this class when we are creating a new instance of this. The reason why it has parameters, these are the stuffs that we're going to call when we are creating a new instance of this class person. Once we have supplied the values for these two parameters, we are then giving or assigning those values to the public properties or public variables here. In this case, the name with a capital letter in front and the age. We're actually not assigning values to this public string name and public numeric age, we're actually calling the constructor and assigning values to it. And what this class does is that it transfers values from the private fields to these public properties. Here I'm going to fill the list from the class person, and we're going to supply that through the event called button click. Okay, before we run this program, let me just explain what's going on in this click event. I'm going to create a list of person and assign that into an object people, the list of these persons here. And each time I create an instance of new person, it goes to the object people. So here we're creating an object, an instance of the object person, and we're creating a list called people. I mean, these objects here, these are multiple instances of objects, is being added to this list, which is called the people. Then after we created all of these instances, or in layman's term, record or records, we then iterate or go through each element of the object people or the list people here. So the for each in C#.NET is another control flow statement, which is similar to the if, which is another control flow statement. So what it does is that it iterates through all this list and append it to the list, this text box here. So let's try and run. Okay, here. Let's click the create button and there you go. Okay, let's just add a separator for this so we don't get confused or we don't concatenate the person and age. Let's run it again. Click create. So there you go. We have created a list based from an encapsulated class that creates a generic list. So here we're going to try and create some kind of validation within the constructor before we assign the value of the supplied values from name and age to the public public properties. So we're going to trap whether the supplied value for the name parameter is empty, and trap if the supplied value for the parameter age is 0. Okay, so what we did here is we removed the return keyword and retained the message box, so it does not call the debugger. So what I'm going to just show here in this program is to just inform the user that some of the name is empty and one of the age supplied is 0, and still show those records to the list. Let's run the code. Here it is saying that the supplied name is empty. Here, the first instance that we created is empty. We deliberately supplied an empty string for this error to pop up. And another thing is, on the third line, we deliberately supplied a 0 value to the age parameter just to show that we can trap or manipulate the supplied values before we assign them to public properties. This is the good thing with encapsulation, and which is very different from the first generic list that I taught to you the last time in my previous lessons. Okay, that's it for today's video. I hope you learned from this tutorial. If you find this video useful, please subscribe to my channel. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day, everyone. Goodbye.